In the ancient world, many kings ruled cities. Some ruled kingdoms. A few, as we have seen, ruled empires. But in Egypt, the ruler was believed to be something more than any of these. He was not merely a king appointed by the gods. He was not a conqueror who had earned divine favor. He was a god, living, breathing, walking among his people, the force that held the universe itself in balance. To understand Egypt, you must first understand the Nile. Every year, without fail, the river rose. It flooded its banks. It spread across the flat valley floor, depositing a fresh layer of the richest soil on earth, dark, moist, almost impossibly fertile. The Egyptians called this the Black Land, the gift of the river. Beyond it, on all sides, stretched the Red Land, the desert, barren, hostile, and impassable. This geography shaped everything. The Nile flood was Egypt's engine. Predictable harvests meant predictable food surpluses. Food surpluses meant that not everyone had to farm. Some people could specialize, some could administer, some could build. Some could create art, keep records, study the stars, and the desert that surrounded Egypt acted as a wall. Unlike Mesopotamia, open to invasion from every direction, Egypt was sheltered. The Sahara to the west, the Sinai to the east, the sea to the north. Within these natural fortifications, a civilization could grow without constant fear of destruction. Around 3100 BCE, a king of Upper Egypt, the Nile Valley, extended his rule north into the delta and united the two lands into a single state. His name was Narmer, or possibly Menes. The ancient sources are not entirely clear, but the act he performed was epoch-making. For the first time in history, a single government ruled a territorial nation, not a city, not a collection of cities, a country, Egypt. At the head of this unified state stood the Pharaoh, but the word king barely captures what the Pharaoh was believed to be. The Egyptians understood the universe as a constant struggle between order and chaos. Their word for this divine order was Ma'at, a concept that encompassed truth, justice, balance, and the proper functioning of the cosmos. The flooding of the Nile at the right time was Ma'at. The sun rising each morning was Ma'at. A good harvest was Ma'at. And the Pharaoh was the living embodiment of Ma'at. His duty, his sacred cosmic duty, was to maintain this balance, to perform the right rituals, to appease the gods, to administer the land with justice, to defend Egypt's borders. If the Pharaoh fulfilled his role, the Nile would flood at the right time. The harvests would be good. Egypt would prosper. If he failed, the consequences were cosmic as well as political. This belief gave the Pharaoh a kind of authority that no Mesopotamian king, not even Naram-Sin, who had declared himself a god, had quite achieved. The Pharaoh did not claim to be appointed by the gods. He claimed to be divine in his own person, from birth to death and beyond. In life, he was the god Horus, the falcon, the living sky. In death, he became Osiris, the god of the underworld, the king of eternity. This was not metaphor. The Egyptians believed it literally. The Egyptians had always buried their rulers in special tombs, but for the first dynasties, these were rectangular mud brick structures called mastabas, flat-roofed, modest by later standards. Then, around 2670 BCE, a pharaoh named Djoser asked his chief architect, a man named Imhotep, to do something different. Imhotep's response changed the history of architecture. He stacked one mastaba on top of another, then another, then another. 6 steps rising into the desert sky at Saqqara, the world's first large-scale stone structure, the Step Pyramid. It was an extraordinary leap. Before this, nothing of this scale had been built in stone anywhere on Earth. Imhotep was not just an architect. He was an inventor of a new way of building. He was so revered by later Egyptians that he was eventually deified as a god of medicine and wisdom. But the step pyramid was only the beginning. A generation later, the pharaoh Sneferu, father of the builder of the Great Pyramid, attempted something more ambitious, a pyramid with smooth, angled sides. His first attempt at Medum seems to have partially collapsed. His second, at Dashur, changed its angle partway up, creating the distinctive bent pyramid that still stands today, a monument to ambition correcting itself in real time. His third attempt, the Red Pyramid, also at Dashur, finally achieved the true pyramid form, smooth, geometric, perfect. Sneferu alone moved more stone than any single pharaoh in Egyptian history. His son would build bigger, but it was Sneferu who solved the engineering problem. Around 2589 BCE, Khufu became pharaoh of Egypt, and he ordered the construction of something the world had never seen, the Great Pyramid of Giza. When it was completed, it stood nearly 147 meters tall, almost 500 feet, and it would remain the tallest structure built by human hands for nearly 4,000 years. The numbers are almost impossible to absorb. Approximately 2.5 million stone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons. Some internal blocks weigh 80 tons. The base covers over 13 acres. The four sides are aligned to the cardinal compass points with an accuracy that challenges modern surveyors. And it was built without iron tools, without the wheel, at least not as a vehicle, without cranes or pulleys in the modern sense. The Egyptians used copper chisels, wooden sledges, water lubrication, organized ramps, and above all, in extraordinary administrative and logistical skill. We now know from workers' graffiti and administrative papyri discovered in recent decades that the pyramid was not built by slaves. It was built by paid workers, teams with names like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkaure, who received wages in food and goods, lived in purpose-built workers' towns, and received medical care when injured. This was not slave labor. This was the world's largest organized workforce, a monument to Egyptian administrative genius as much as to royal ambition. The pyramid was not just a tomb. It was a machine for royal immortality. The internal chambers and passages were designed to guide the pharaoh's soul on its journey through the underworld to become one with the gods. The precise astronomical alignments, the shafts pointing towards certain stars, were not decorative. They were functional in the Egyptian understanding of the cosmos. Khufu was not building a monument. He was engineering his own eternal life. For perhaps 5 centuries, the Old Kingdom held. It was a world of extraordinary achievement, not just the pyramids, but the administrative systems behind them, the tax records, the census data, the carefully organized redistribution of agricultural surplus across a country hundreds of miles long. Egyptian art reached a classical perfection that later dynasties would look back on as a golden standard. Egyptian medicine, though mystical by modern standards, was the most systematic in the ancient world. Egyptian mathematics could calculate the volume of a pyramid, the area of a circle, the trajectory of a flood. But holding it all together required something that no administrative system could guarantee: a succession of strong, capable pharaohs. As time passed, the strains began to show. The provincial governors, the nomarchs, had always administered Egypt's regions on behalf of the pharaoh. In the early Old Kingdom, they were appointed officials answerable to the capital, but over generations their positions became hereditary. Their courts grew more elaborate, their tombs grew more impressive, a subtle but unmistakable signal that power was drifting away from the center. A wealthy nomarch who could pass his position to his son was no longer an official. He was a feudal lord. At the same time, the sheer cost of pyramid building had drained the royal treasury. Vast estates had been granted to temples and to the families of officials in exchange for their service. Over generations, these grants could not be revoked. The pharaoh's direct control over land and wealth slowly contracted. And then there was the climate. Modern climate studies, the same research that illuminated the collapse of the Akkadian Empire, suggest that the late 3rd millennium BCE saw a significant reduction in Nile flood levels across several decades. Harvests fell short. Grain stores ran low. The provincial governors who controlled local food supplies became more powerful than ever, while the central government's ability to feed its population and maintain its authority declined. The last great pharaoh of the Old Kingdom was Pepi II. According to some ancient sources, he ruled for 94 years, the longest reign in history. Whether the figure is precise or legendary, his reign ended in weakness. When he died, there was no strong successor. The provinces asserted their independence. The unity of Egypt dissolved. Around 2160 BCE, the Old Kingdom ended, not with a foreign invasion, not with a single decisive battle, but with a slow, grinding dissolution. Egypt divided. Local rulers took control of their own regions. For roughly a century and a half, the country that had once built the greatest structures on earth could no longer agree on who its king was. Ancient texts from this period, letters, lamentations, literary compositions, describe a world turned upside down. The rich have become poor. The poor have seized the possessions of the wealthy. The country is without order. The dead are not properly buried. For a civilization in which the proper burial of the dead was literally a cosmic obligation, in which the fate of the soul depended on the correct performance of funerary rites, this was not merely a political complaint. It was a description of the collapse of the universe itself. Ma'at had failed. The divine order that the pharaoh was supposed to maintain had broken down. But the pyramids still stood, silent, massive, unchanged. They reminded every local ruler who looked toward Giza of what Egypt had once been. They preserved the memory of a unified, powerful, divinely ordered state, not as a myth or a legend, but as a physical fact, visible from miles away, impossible to deny. Egypt would recover. In time, a new dynasty from the southern city of Thebes would reunite the country, beginning what historians call the Middle Kingdom. Then the new kingdom would follow, the age of Ramesses, of Tutankhamun, of Abu Simbel. Egypt's story was far from over, but the Old Kingdom had done something that could never be undone. It had defined what Egypt was. It had established that Egypt was a nation ruled by a divine king, a living God whose duty was to maintain the cosmic order. That idea did not die in 2160 BCE. It survived for another 2,000 years of Egyptian history, shaping every pharaoh who came after, every temple that was built, every ritual that was performed. And the pyramids themselves became the defining image of an entire civilization, so recognizable, so enduring, that when the modern world thinks of ancient Egypt, it is still the pyramids it sees. They were declarations carved in limestone that a state could command not just the labor of its people, but time itself. The Old Kingdom ended, the pyramids did not.